Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and we're going to look at the recent price results over at LCG Auctions. And LCG is run by a gentleman named Dennis Hall, and he had told me about the auction and said, hey, if you want to do a preview for these auctions that are ending Sunday, it's a good time to do it because we've got a lot of really good items. And unfortunately, I was out of town by the time I even realized these auctions were going on. So Dennis, I'm sorry I couldn't do a preview before these auctions ended, but there were a number of really incredible items that ended last night on October 13th, and I wanted to at least show you the sales prices for a lot of them because there were some big heaters in this auction lot. So LCG, we've talked about some of their items in the past, but they had a really great fall premiere auction going. So the first one is the 1978 Kenner Canada R2-D2 walking wind-up figure. And this is an AFA 50. So not a particularly high grade, but we've seen some that have sold into the five figures, into the $10,000 plus range in higher grade. So this was an AFA 50. It's a very wonky, hard to find item that people pay big money for. And you can see there the card got a 60 blister, 40 figure 85. So not a particularly high grade example, but it was still mint on card. It sold for $34.21. And I believe that these prices do not include the auction premium, the buyer's premium that you got to pay. And I don't remember the exact number. I probably should have looked. Oh, I'm sorry. Prices shown do include the buyer's premium. So excuse me on that one. So I think the buyer's premium is around 20%. And they do not take credit card. That's the only negative about LCG. I think they need to work on that because that kind of precludes a lot of buyers from buying because they only take either, I think, check or Venmo. And there's not a lot of buyer's protection there. So hopefully Dennis is watching and can work on maybe adding a credit card option for paying. But all of the prices I'm going to show do include the buyer's premium. So that did show up there. There were a number of really nice Meccano kind of rectangle cards, these 20 backs that are very desirable among collectors of foreign vintage. First is the Death Squad Commander. It was an AFA 75, slightly yellowed blister punched example. That one sold for $13.75, kind of right in line with where the last one that we saw, I think it was a UKG 75 that sold on eBay from Gold Star Tech. It was kind of in that ballpark, so I think that was a very fair price there. Here was a Jawa. Obviously, this is the most common for these 20-back French square cards. And this one was ungraded, but it was a pretty clean example. It looks like a clear blister to me. And that one sold for $4.98. AFA 80s, 85s tend to go in that $700 to $900 price point. So for an ungraded example, I thought that was very fair. And then here was Ben Kenobi. These are the three most common of the square cards, the Ben Kenobi, Death Squad Commander, and the Jawa. Again, this one was ungraded. It did have a crack in the blister and sold for $547. $547 on that one. Here was the YPS Imperial Stormtrooper. It's a Spanish PBP figure that was packed in with this particular magazine that was included in the auction. It was not displayed with the figure, but you could certainly get a case to display it behind it. The figure comes with the alternate G.I. Joe style weapon, the black rifle, and it's the Spanish PBP figure graded UKG 80%. That one sold for $374. Again, a very fair price for what it was. The magazine is probably the rarest part of this auction lot, but it did include the alternate weapon. So $374 on that one. Here was a really tough to find removable hood Lily Letty Jawa graded AFA 70. So this was a mint on card Lily Letty. And you can see the subgrades on this. Card 70, blister 70, figure 85, removable hood. Wow, what a stunner. $55.09 was the final sales price on that. I think we just detailed one that CIB sold at auction. That was an AFA 80 that sold for big money. I don't remember the exact number, but it was, $10,000 or so. So for an AFA 70, $55.09, very fair price in my mind. There were three different Hungarian bootlegs that sold. These were from 1987. Very cool card art. The blisters were kind of stapled on, and two of them were ungraded that you can see here. First is the C-3PO, and there's the back. There's just very plain backs, but These are very commonly faked, so you got to be really careful on these, but this one was advertised as the 1987 Hungarian bootleg C-3PO red card. $770 was the final sales price on that. The Chewbacca, another very common Hungarian bootleg, that one sold for $847 on the red card. And then here was an AFA 80 qualified grade Wicket on the green card. This is Population 2. And they give it the qualified grade because the blisters are stapled onto the card back. So card 80, blister 75, figure 85, qualified 80 overall, one of two on the AFA population report. Very cool to see that. That one sold for $847. All three of those prices are prices I would have paid in a heartbeat. I thought those were very good. Next up was the Glassleet R2-D2 pop-up lightsaber droids, and this is a CAS 50. And you can see the obvious damage to the card on this one. Total tear on the left-hand side, along with a lot of spider veins all throughout the card. And the blister had blister support because it did have a crack and a hole in the blister. And so here's the subgrades, 50, 50, 80 were the subscores on that. Now, for reference, Louise, who watches the channel, and I showed in the wrap-up for the ICCC lobby sales, he bought a CAS 70, and I think he paid $1,400 for it, going on memory. This one was a CAS 50 and sold for $1,375. So congrats to Louise for finding that one at the lobby sales, because that was a much higher grade, no card damage to it. It was a very clean example. It was also a clear blister, and he got it for basically the same price that this CAS 50 sold for in an auction. So good deal for Louise. And here is another very tough to find one. This is the Glasslight Interceptor, the ATL Interceptor. Very, very rare item, AFA 75. It did not show the pop report on this one. Oh, here it is. I keep saying that they don't have it, and then they have it in the auction lot description. This is one of only 4 factory sealed graded examples in AFA's population. So this is the Glasslight ATL Interceptor, one of 4. And that one sold for $967. That was an absolute steal of a deal. Really good deal on that. I would have certainly guessed a lot more money for that one. $967 was a great deal. Some store displays that sold. There are none graded higher for this Toy Galaxy Bell Hanger store display, graded AFA 85 plus. And that one sold for $8,065. Again, I don't have a reference point. I do know that there was one, I believe, in the last Hakes auction that sold. Can't remember what it sold for. I probably should have looked it up before I started this video. But this one was an AFA 85 plus, none higher. $80.65 was the final sales price. Here was the Shelf Talker AFA 90, none graded higher, that sold for $14.17. That one seems like a really good deal relative to the grade. AFA 90s usually go for a significant premium, but in this case, this one, I would have guessed in the 2000s pretty easily for this. We've seen some AFA 80s and 85s that have sold, so in the same price point. So for an AFA 90, none graded higher, that's a really good deal there. Here was a double telescoping Darth Vader. This is a very tough to find item. This was a CAS 70 grade, and there is the label on that one. Double L on the hilt, telescoping saber. If I had to guess, it looks like it's missing part of the inner filament. It looks a little short to me, just at first glance there. And it did not mention anything about the inner filament being a little bit short, but that would be my guess on that as to why it got the 70 grade. The figure itself looks very mint, so it has to be related to the inner filament. $6,060 for that CAS 70 double telescoping Vader. Very, very tough to find item. Some very high-grade mocks also sold, early card backs. 12-back A Palatoy, AFA 85, none graded higher. And that one sold for $55.12. That is a big number, big number. I would have guessed in the $3,000 to $3,500 ballpark, but it was an AFA 85, none graded higher for the Palatoy. And unpunched example, no price sticker. Absolute stunner on that one. Here was a 12-back A Princess Leia, and this one was an AFA 85 with a price sticker, punched example, clear blister, $44.46 on that one. Absolutely stunning. Wow. Really, really high grades. And here was a 12-back A SKU footer R2-D2, graded AFA 80. Here's the label on that one. SKU on figure stand 80, 85, 80. That one sold for $36.74.40 after the buyer's premium. And then we had an interesting yak that sold. It was a UKG 80, but unfortunately it had some mold growth. You can see here in the description, there appears to be black mildew or spotting on the left-hand side of the card beneath the bubble. The black spotting is found on the left edge of the coin and below the top left corner. So please keep this in mind with bidding. So congrats to the auction house for showing this. And it's very obvious that this black mold was starting to form, but it was just good that they at least showed that in the description. But that really is a shame because it was a UKG 80 before, but unfortunately it just was not stored properly. There must have been some moisture that got underneath there. These cases for the mint on cards, they do usually have a small gap on the bottom of the back, and that allows for air growth to kind of circulate in there. So that's must have been how it got in there. It was just stored in an area that just had some moisture, and that's unfortunate. You got to have a dehumidifier for these really expensive items. Now, do I for my collection? No. So maybe that happens to me one day. Who knows? But it's still sold for $5,000. Again, that's probably about half of what this item is worth for a UKG 80 unpunched, no price sticker, yak face on the Kenner Canada card back, Power of the Force. That's a 5-figure item usually. So it's a shame that it happened, but it's still sold for $5,000. And then another very expensive item is the Power of the Force Nikto. And this one had the mismatched Warwick coin, which is a common thing. And these were available only down in Australia and New Zealand. So this one was not graded. It was obviously in pretty rough shape, as you can see by the top of the card there. Some other sticker residue on the right-hand side. But still, this is a very, very rare item. And it's still sold for $2,827. Some vehicles after one more Power of the Force, very rare item. This is the Anakin Skywalker, and it was ungraded, but it had some spider veins on the top left-hand corner. Big crease that went all the way through the card there. So again, these were kind of more budget-friendly items for Holy Grail type items, and it's still a very expensive item though. And there was one, it was nice enough to mention here, $17,000 at auction. This is probably a Hakes item. That was an AFA 80 with a 75 subgrade. This was an ungraded example, probably in about 50 or 60 grade. That one sold for $37.63. And then to round things out, I do have some vehicles. This was a CAS 75 factory sealed radio controlled Jawa Sandcrawler. This one only sold for $31.10. I am shocked by that low of a sales price. That is a very low price for a CAS 75. So why it went so low, I don't know. But that one, I mean, that's borderline what ungraded examples go for that are open. I mean, you can find eBay sales for loose, complete, unused contents that would be in that price point, I would think. But this is a CAS 75 factory sealed for $31.10. Again, you guys can maybe comment below while you're leaving me a like as to why that one sold so low. But that's a shocker that it went that low. That was a good deal. Next up was a qualified AFA 85 for the ESB Snowspeeder. This is the blue box with the $1 rebate offer. And this one is the highest graded population 1 on this one. So tough to find with that rebate sticker. Apparently, it's one of one on the AFA population report for the qualified grade. I'm sure there's some factory sealed examples out there that we'll probably see next year in the Hakes Jeff Jacobs auctions. But $12.88 was the final sales price on that for the AFA qualified 85. And then an AFA 75 factory sealed AT-AT with the Empire Strikes Back packaging. That one sold for $41.40, another very fair price relative to some of the other examples that we've seen. That one certainly, they mentioned this in the auction description. This one certainly presents nicer than a 75. That is a beautiful example. And, you can make an argument that $41.40 is well below fair market value for that. So there were some items that seemed to me, especially the Jawa Sandcrawler, this AT-AT, that seemed to went, a little bit below fair market value, and lots of really interesting items. So you need to keep LCG auctions on your radar. Just make sure to sign up for an account and, review the closing process, because it's not a standard slap your credit card on file like with some of the other auction houses, but hopefully that changes in the future. Anyway, that's all I really had for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be back very soon.